Hello everyone, this is Dr. Shijun Wang from Weber State University. In today's video, I am going to teach you how did I practice Opus 10 number 9. This is one of my favorite etudes. It doesn't have a nickname like the Ocean or the Black Keys or the Toccata. However, it's very close to the very deep soul of Chopin's character. We know, and I've introduced Chopin's favorite composers in the previous episode, and he likes Bach, right? He carries the Book of Tempo Clavier everywhere, and he can play easily like 10 of them by memory, and he thinks that's the best exercises that a pianist needs. And we can also tell from his contrapunto writing the influence of J.F. Bach. And he also likes Mozart. He often assigns students Bach and Mozart sonatas because the singing style and often, like, if we just make the Mozart phrasing much longer, and it really shows like the phrasing of Chopin himself. The other favorite composer of Chopin's liking is Bellini, one of the bel canto school composers, an Italian opera composer. Not only that they liked each other's music, from the book I read, even the look or the character of these two composers are very similar, and they unfortunately both died in a very young age. We don't have a name to call this, but it's very much sounding like a love duet or a duet. And because from the very beginning, it's a duet between the two hands. And also in the middle section, when we have this section, you can of course you can see this as a conversation between two characters, or you can see this as it's one character singing, but with kind of like a conflict inside, right? He's trying to decide what to do, and there are two voices in his head or her head. Anyways, the technical aspect of this is difficult pretty much on the left-hand side. We need to have a very flexible wrist, of course, again, to help us to reach this top note, the high notes. And I think many editions says Chopin suggested to use number 4, fourth finger on the second note on the C, and some edition says it's the third finger that is Chopin's fingering. It's very likely that he puts two kinds of fingering on the score, because sometimes he puts two kinds of articulation, or even more than two kinds, or even sometimes the notes he changes. So here, I personally use 3 because I think it's easier for me to use a stronger finger as a pivot. And I practice this way to get familiar with how far I need to travel while holding this, because even when you're playing, you're pretty much holding your third finger, or one finger you're using, maybe 2, maybe 4, on that same note. Yep. But I don't think the difficulty level is that overwhelming, because most of the time it stays in a pretty close range. As long as the supporting finger or the pivotal finger is holding up, and then you're using your wrist to adjust the angle, this should be, relatively speaking, easier studies in this whole set. Okay, but musically it has with really a lot to say compared to the other etudes. This rest, rest, rest is a pretty special treatment of the melody. I think this rest really is telling us that the piece, first of all, is in minor. It has many rests. It's almost like this very heavy breathing, body, ba-bum, right? It's urgent. It's something that with a lot of tension inside, almost like the dramatic Italian opera. Okay, and it's in 4-bar phrases, and the 4-bar phrase is repeated 4 times, right? Classical writing of Chopin. And when you have a set form, a standard form, then of course you need some kind of different phrasing or different feeling to take a turn, and that happened in measure 17. I mean, I first noticed that the heavy breathing, this very important 8th note rest is gone. Now we have much longer phrases. But still 4-bar though, okay? And he breaks this in the next phrase. First of all, we have to talk about this medial relation, the third relationship that is, he placed it wonderfully here. As we can see, we can tell from number 1, and then up until now, his harmonic language enriched a lot. So here we have this phrasing. Ended on the A flat major, which is the relative major of F minor. And usually we will go to probably the subdominant or the dominant of this new key, but he chose C flat major. Almost like it's a sharp turn into something totally unknown. Okay, and here, because the third relation, they do have one note in common, right? In this case, it's the E flat, and that's a very commonly used or frequently used chords relations in the Star Wars series movie, right? When you feel like, oh, it's something displaced, or you went to maybe another space, you have this feeling. However, here he did not continue with the 4-bar phrase. Something interrupted it on the 4th measure, so it's only a 3-bar phrase. And then 2 little phrases per measure. And then 3 slurs in well, of course, we call that hemiola, right? It's either 2 groups of 3 or 3 groups of 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But if we look at the bigger picture, we really had 4-bar phrases reduced into 3, into 1, and then half, and then 1/3. So really he uses both the harmonic acceleration and then the phrasing, shortening phrasing, to show the climax. Okay, and then we get to this wonderful dramatic section. You can call it conversation, or you can call it like a struggle inside with one character. But one thing really worth talking about is how we change from subito forte to subito piano. We usually will take a little longer time in between. There is a very practical reason, because when our ear is filled with loud sound, and then you suddenly play something soft, then our ear might very likely not be able to pick it, right? Or maybe you think, oh, did he play something? Right? We can't hear it. So we take some extra time. And also, logically speaking, if somebody is very excited, it takes a little longer time for this person to calm down, right? For the heartbeat to slow down. But when we change from soft to loud, we can just go direct. We can go forward. Because I mean, people are human beings, are capable of sudden excitement, but not capable of sudden calming down, right? We can't just calm down suddenly. All right. And then this piece comes back. The theme comes back in the recap section, but only to have octaves on the third measure, on the third phrase. And here something really wonderful happens on the fourth time he repeated this 4-bar phrasing. That's when he changes to major. And when we teach young pianists for the first time the difference, this wonderful differences between major and minor, we call this sunny day, rainy day, right? Dark and bright. But really, that's only the tip of the iceberg, only a little bit of the difference between these two modes. Sometimes the minor can show urgency, right? Most of the time, the very dramatic pieces starts in minor, like D minor, right? Bach third, Brahms first, and here F minor. It really gives us a sense of urgency. But here, I sense hope. I sense something you can look forward to. It's not as dramatic. And almost this is like the changing key in the Schubert sonata or impromptus. Okay, so here, instead of being brighter, I think here it's more tender in this major section. And of course, it develops into something more dramatic. And this piece ends in a very strange way for piano music, right? Most of the time, when you begin something dramatic, you end something dramatic. When you begin, and then you end it loudly, right? When you begin, you end it loudly. But here, you really begin something quite dramatic, but like a bell ringing. It finishes like this, almost like how an opera composer will end a duet or end an aria with the singers leaving the stage and waving goodbye, and then the curtain drops, and then the audience claps. So in many senses, this is really an opera sounding, a duet sounding piece. Okay, and one more interesting story on this F minor etude is how people often think sounds very similar with the transcendental etudes by Liszt, right? Number 10, the F minor. It has this. It has this section, and exactly the same rhythm, exactly the same key, and almost this very similar contour of the phrasing, right? One is, and one is. And which one is first? Who copied whom? Liszt had 3 versions of transcendental etudes. The one that is commonly used is the third version, and he really made it much easier from the second version, which nobody on earth could play. Clara Schumann said only a handful of pianists on the planet can play this. The Fofele, the Mazeppa, all those difficult parts that everybody suffers. Many times he was using octaves instead of single notes on the third version. So he reduced it so that it's more playable. But there is a first version that he composed and published when he was only 15 years old. I think it's S136, that's the first version. And I try to compare that first version with this one. The first version comes like so it doesn't have the same feeling and it doesn't have the same rhythmic pattern in it. But then the second edition, the second version of Liszt Transcendental Etude, he published when he was 26, and that's I think 5 or 6 years later than this one, and that already had this same phrasing and musical feeling to it. So I wouldn't say that Chopin copied from the 15-year-old version Liszt, but did Liszt copy Chopin? We have no proof, but it's possible, right? Of course, Chopin really disliked how Liszt had a hand on everything he touches because he made everything into his own, right? He constantly changed and adds his own things, even to other people's composition. But to answer this question, maybe not possible for Chopin to copy Liszt, but quite possible that Liszt was inspired by this piece and turned to his famous F minor into something more operatic-like. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and you can learn something from my experience learning these. Next week, I'm going to talk about Opus 10, number 10, one of the rarely played but super difficult etude, and it's a great example of exercises on articulation. Okay, I will see you next week. Thank you for watching.